The prairie looked endless because it wanted to lie about its emptiness. At dawn, the horizon bled into pale yellow, and the air shimmered with dust still hanging from the herds that had crossed 2 days earlier. A single old bull moved slower than the wind that carried his scent. His coat was scarred, patches of hair missing where time had taken more than wolves ever could. He walked alone now, his shadow long, uneven, stretching across grass that bent just enough to pretend it still remembered the weight of thousands. Far behind him, the land wore wounds, wheel tracks, fence posts, and squares of soil cut by machines that hummed where thunder once lived. The buffalo paused at the edge of a dry riverbed. He lowered his head, sniffed at the cracked clay, and exhaled a cloud of dust that glowed like smoke in the first light. His breath was the only movement that didn't sound mechanical. From a ridge above, a truck engine idled. A man sat on its hood with a rifle across his knees. His hat cast a line of shadow across eyes that had forgotten what mercy was supposed to feel like. He wasn't here to kill. He told himself that. He was here to track, to study, to prove there was still something left to understand about the animals that used to rule this land. But the gun wasn't for science. It was for fear. The buffalo lifted his head, nostrils flaring. He didn't see the man. He didn't need to. The air spoke the truth. Human sweat, oil, and iron, smells that didn't belong to grass. He turned slightly, not to run, but to remember the direction from which his ancestors came. His tail flicked once, dismissing flies that no longer cared if he lived or died. The man raised his binoculars. Through the lenses, the buffalo seemed too large for the world that remained. Dust spiraled around him like ghosts reluctant to leave. The man whispered under his breath, something between apology and disbelief. Behind him, another door opened. A younger man, his son, stepped out of the cab, squinting against the light. "There's just one?" the boy asked. "Just one," the father said. The boy frowned. "I thought they moved in herds." "They did." The man's voice was flat. "Before we taught them not to." The boy looked at the rifle. "We aren't going to shoot it, right?" The father didn't answer right away. He lowered the binoculars, watching the dust drift. The buffalo had begun to walk again, slow, deliberate steps toward the horizon. The man rubbed his thumb over the rifle's trigger guard. "We're not hunters," he said finally. "Not today." The boy exhaled, half relieved, but the man's hand didn't leave the gun. Down on the plains, the buffalo stopped again, staring at a fence line running endless and cruel through the grass. The wire gleamed in sunlight like something sharp enough to cut history itself. He stepped closer, testing the boundary with the patience of age. One horn brushed a post, the sound hollow and final. He could smell the herds beyond it, those who hadn't escaped the new rules. Wind rose suddenly, dragging the scent of old earth and metal toward the truck. The boy flinched. "Smells like fire," he said. "It's just dust," his father answered, though even he didn't believe it. The buffalo turned east, away from the fence, and began to move again. His hooves stirred dry soil into another slow storm. For a moment, it looked like the land itself was breathing through him. The man lowered his rifle. The boy stared. The horizon swallowed the buffalo by degrees until nothing remained except a trail of dust curling into the sky like a prayer too heavy to rise. Only then did the wind change. It shifted across the plains and filled the emptiness he left behind with a sound that hadn't been heard in years. Something soft, uncertain, like the world testing the idea of exhaling again. And for the first time in a long while, the earth smelled alive instead of tired. The wind came back stronger the next day, dragging clouds of red dust across the plains like a curtain closing over an old performance. The buffalo's trail had already begun to fade, its prints half filled by loose soil. Still, the father and son followed, the truck crawling through grass that had turned brittle enough to whisper under the tires. The boy leaned out the window, camera in hand. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to see. His father hadn't said. Maybe proof that the animal was real. Maybe proof that it was gone. They drove until the fence appeared again, running straight as gilt from one horizon to the other. The wire shimmered in the heat. The father cut the engine. Silence fell heavy. Somewhere out there, the buffalo was moving, slowly, invisibly, but the air carried his scent like an echo that refused to die. The boy climbed out, stretching, squinting into the distance. He could be anywhere, he said. He'll stay close to the old waterbeds, the father murmured. They always do. He knelt by one of the fence posts, brushing dust from the base. A tuft of coarse fur clung to the wire. The boy saw it and hesitated. He hit the fence? Or tried to push through it, the man said. His hand lingered on the fur longer than it needed to. They never learn it doesn't bend. The boy crouched beside him. Then why keep trying? The man looked out at the horizon, eyes narrowing against the glare. Because they remember when it wasn't here. A hawk called overhead, circling lazy spirals that didn't care about human questions. The boy raised his camera but didn't press the shutter. Nothing seemed worth capturing. Everything felt unfinished. Behind them, the prairie shimmered under heat. A shape moved near the dry river cut. Something large and dark, moving too slow for a deer, too heavy for a shadow. The boy pointed. There! The man followed his gaze. The buffalo stood knee-deep in grass, sides heaving with the rhythm of long travel. He had found water, thin, muddy, but enough. The boy's breath caught. He made it through? No, the father said quietly. He's still on this side. They watched him for a long while. He lowered his head to drink, but the waterline barely reached his tongue. When he finished, he turned toward the fence again. The boy stepped forward unconsciously. He's not going to try again, is he? The man's hand shot out, stopping him. Don't move. The buffalo stared at the fence, the way soldiers stare at walls they once built themselves. His breath clouded in the heat, hooves pawing the dry ground. Then he charged, not with speed, but with weight, as if the point was never to reach the other side, only to remind the earth it used to tremble. The wire snapped taut. Metal sang. The post shook but held. The buffalo stumbled back, dust exploding around him. He stood again, chest heaving, blood beating where wire had bitten flesh. The boy gasped. He's bleeding! The man said nothing, his jaw clenched, eyes unreadable. The buffalo faced the fence one last time, then turned away. He limped east, toward a stretch of land where no fences waited, only wind and open sky. His gait was slow but certain. The boy swallowed. We should help him. How? The man asked. With what? A map? A prayer? The boy looked down at the broken wire, the fur caught in it, the smear of blood on the post. Maybe just let him go, he said softly. The man finally exhaled. That's the only help we ever gave them. They stood there long after the buffalo vanished from view. The sun lowered, dragging their shadows long across the ground until they looked like two pieces of the same fence, rooted still, separating what lived from what survived. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled, not from a storm, but from the memory of hooves the land still heard in its sleep. And when the wind shifted again, it didn't carry dust this time. It carried grass seeds, tiny, weightless things daring to grow where blood had fallen. The plains breathed just once, but it was enough to sound like hope. By the third day, the sky had turned pale and hard, a sheet of light without depth. The air shimmered above the plains, like heat pretending to be ghosts. The buffalo's tracks led farther east, across broken grass and stretches of bare earth that looked scorched but weren't. The father drove in silence, both hands tight on the wheel, eyes fixed far ahead as if looking too close might break something sacred. The boy watched the horizon instead of the road, the camera hanging from his neck untouched. Neither spoke of turning back. They reached the remains of a camp near dusk. The land dipped slightly, sheltered from the worst of the wind. Canvas fragments clung to bent metal poles, and a ring of stones marked where a fire had once been. Bones, cattle, maybe bison, maybe both, lay bleached under sun and time. The boy climbed from the truck and kicked at the ash circle. It was long dead. What is this place? He asked. Know where they held them, the father said. He got out slowly, his joints stiff from driving. Before transport, before slaughter, before everything ended. The boy frowned. Like a corral? Like a prison. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of iron and something older. Blood long dried into dust. The boy walked around the site, his boots crunching through brittle grass. You've been here before. The man didn't answer right away. He crouched, running his fingers through the dirt, until he unearthed something small. A rusted tag, a piece of wire twisted through a hole. He wiped it clean with his thumb. Numbers etched faintly into the metal. My father brought me once, he said finally. Said I should remember where we traded thunder for silence. The boy looked at him, unsure whether to ask what that meant. Instead, he lifted his camera and took a photo. The camp, the sky, the man standing in the center of it all. When the shutter clicked, the sound startled both of them. The man pocketed the tag. We'll camp here tonight. They built a small fire using dead branches. The flames struggled against the wind, snapping sideways, refusing to burn straight. The boy lay back, staring up. Do you think he's still alive? The buffalo? The man asked. Yeah. Alive enough to keep walking, he said. That's more than most. They ate quietly. Crickets began their patient choir. In the distance, coyotes barked and faded. The night air carried no cold, only the smell of dry grass and something like regret. After a while, the boy said, Why did we stop protecting them? The man stared into the fire. We didn't stop. We just changed what protection meant. Fences, breeding pens, documentaries. We saved their image and killed their purpose. The boy turned the camera in his hands. Maybe if people saw him, they'd care again. They saw them before, the man said. They didn't care then either. Silence stretched. The fire hissed. Somewhere out on the plains, wind dragged over open ground and made a sound like hooves rolling through memory. The boy sat up suddenly. Did you hear that? The man froze, listening. A low, rhythmic thud, steady, fading, then returning. Too slow for machinery, too alive for echoes. They stood. The sound grew clearer. The boy grabbed the flashlight and swept its beam across the prairie. Grass bent under invisible weight. A dark shape moved just beyond the light's edge. The man raised his hand. Don't move! The buffalo stepped into view, dust clinging to his flanks, his shoulder marked with the red scab of the fence wound. His breath came in heavy clouds. He didn't look at them. He looked past them, toward the old campfire ring, toward the bones that had once belonged to his kind. He took one slow step closer, head bowed as if recognizing something ancient. The boy's voice was barely a whisper. Why would he come here? The man's throat worked before words came. To remember. The buffalo stood there in silence for a long time. Firelight flickered across his hide, giving him the illusion of movement even when he was still. Then he snorted once, a sound deep enough to shake the dirt, and turned away. He walked north, vanishing into the same wind that had carried his dust across centuries. The fire cracked behind them. The boy turned to his father. He shouldn't be alone. The man stared at the dark horizon. He's not, he said quietly. Yep, not while this land remembers. The wind rose again, carrying the scent of dust and distance. The plains exhaled slow and deep, as though learning once more how to breathe. Morning came without ceremony. The horizon didn't brighten so much as loosen its grip on darkness. Smoke from their fire had already joined the wind, drifting toward the north where the buffalo had disappeared. The father doused the coals, grinding ash into soil until only a gray smudge remained. The boy stared at the tracks pressed into the dirt, deep, wide, deliberate. They looked more like wounds than prints. North, he said, already knowing the answer. The man nodded. North. They followed the trail on foot this time. The truck had become a burden, too loud, too heavy for land that deserved quiet. Grass brushed against their knees. The sun climbed slowly, hazed by dust and distance. Occasionally, they came across relics left by others. A bullet casing dulled by rust, a broken whiskey bottle half swallowed by soil, a piece of leather rein. Every fragment told the same story. Men chasing control and finding emptiness instead. Around midday, they reached the edge of a settlement. It wasn't on any map, just a cluster of cabins built from old railroad timber and patched with sheet metal. A line of solar panels glared dull light toward the sky. 2 wind turbines turned lazily in air, too tired to resist them. The boy's first thought was that it looked abandoned. His second was that it wasn't. Dogs barked when they approached. Not wild, not tame, just wary. A woman stepped out from behind one of the cabins, rifle slung across her shoulder but barrel down. She was middle-aged, her face leathered by wind and grit, her eyes calm in a way that didn't need to threaten. "You're off the reservation road," she said, not unkindly. "You lost." The man shook his head. "Following an animal. That's rare these days." She smiled faintly. "Dead, feral, or fenced?" Alive, the boy said quickly. Big, old, buffalo. Her smile faded. She studied their faces, then looked toward the plains behind them, as if expecting to see dust moving. You're not the first to say that. Come inside. The interior smelled of smoke and dried sage. Maps covered the walls, dotted with red pins tracing routes that bled across counties. Photos pinned between them showed open prairie, storm skies, silhouettes of bison running through dusk. Some were blurred, but not by accident. Movement was proof. The woman poured water from a tin jug. Name's Clara. I keep records. The government stopped a decade ago. Records of what? The boy asked. Of the ones that still remember how to be wild, she said simply. We've been tracking a bull for 3 weeks. Big, scarred, moves like he's got ghosts on his back. That's him, the boy said before his father could speak. Clara nodded slowly. We call him Dustwalker. Last pure one born outside captivity. If you've seen him, then he's still fighting the fences. The man leaned forward. You've been following him? Not following, she corrected. Waiting. He always circles back here eventually. The land remembers his steps, same as he remembers the land. From another room came the sound of boots. 2 men entering, faces streaked with sweat and dust. They nodded to Clara, then stopped when they saw the strangers. You the ones saw him last night? One asked. The man nodded. He came to the old holding camp. The younger of the 2 men swore softly. He goes there every season. Sometimes stands there for hours, like he's looking for the others. Clara crossed her arms. He's the last of the first herd, the ones my grandfather saw before they built the highways. He comes through every spring, tests the fence, never breaks it. Just tries. The boy frowned. Why not help him cross? Clara met his gaze. Because there's no herd waiting on the other side. Just farmland and noise. Outside, the wind shifted again, dragging the smell of dust through the cracks in the walls. It smelled different now. Sharper, cleaner, like storm breath. The dogs went quiet. Everyone turned toward the sound that followed. A low vibration, steady, almost rhythmic. Not thunder. Hooves. They stepped outside together. In the far distance, the horizon rippled. Dust columns lifted like smoke trails. The man raised his hand to shield his eyes. That can't be. Clara's voice broke the silence. He found others. Through the haze, silhouettes moved, 6, maybe more. Smaller, younger. Escaped from fenced reserves, strays from private herds. It didn't matter. They followed the bull's lead, tentative but sure. The plains trembled under their collective rhythm. Clara whispered something that sounded like prayer, but carried no religion. I thought they'd forgotten. The boy raised his camera, snapping photo after photo, each click like punctuation in a story too big to tell. The man stood still, unable to move. His hand went to his pocket, fingers brushing the rusted tag he had taken from the camp, the last number of a lost herd. The dust thickened, rolling toward them in waves. The sound of hooves became a heartbeat. The earth had missed for generations. Then, as quickly as it came, it began to fade. The herd turned east, toward the open. The bull lingered a moment longer, looking back across the plain toward the humans watching. His breath rose in clouds of dust. His eyes, black and calm, held theirs. Then he turned and led the herd away, not toward fences or roads, but deeper into the silence that was once their birthright. The boy lowered his camera slowly. They're real, he whispered. The man nodded. For now. The wind blew harder, scattering dust into the air. It looked like breath, like release. The plains exhaled again, louder this time, as if remembering the rhythm of life it had buried beneath barbed wire and machines. And for the first time in living memory, the ground didn't just echo the sound of hooves, it welcomed them. Night returned to the plains like an old secret, quiet, deliberate, unashamed of its power. The herd had vanished hours ago, but the air still carried their memory. Dust hung low and gold under the moonlight, every particle alive with the pulse of what had just been reborn. The father, the boy, and Clara stood outside the settlement long after the silhouettes disappeared, listening to silence that wasn't empty anymore. They won't make it far, one of Clara's men said at last. His voice was dry, brittle like the weeds that clung to fence lines. There's nothing out there but road, fences, and fields. Clara didn't answer right away. She watched the horizon until her eyes watered. Roads end, she said quietly. Grass doesn't. The boy sat cross-legged in the dirt, camera in his lap, reviewing images that refused to explain themselves. The pictures were blurred by dust, grainy from low light, but each frame throbbed with movement. Proof that something larger than logic had happened. He turned one photo around so his father could see. Shadowed shapes, legs mid-stride. The great bull at the center, his body half dissolved into the dust he carried with him. They're headed north, the boy said. Past the reservation line? The father rubbed his jaw, thinking. That land's cut by the interstate now. They'll hit pavement before sunrise. The word interstate felt wrong here, a foreign sound among wind and grass. Clara nodded slowly. Then that's where we go. They moved fast. 2 trucks, 5 people, headlights dimmed to slits. The engines murmured through the flat dark, tires humming over cracked asphalt. Coyotes scattered at their approach. The rest of the world stayed asleep. The father drove lead, eyes scanning the road's edge for motion. He kept the windows open, smelling the air the way the buffalo had, searching for dust, for life, for direction. The boy leaned forward between the seats, the camera strapped across his chest. You think they'll try to cross? If he remembers freedom, the father said, he will. And then they saw it. Far ahead, ghost shapes drifted through the moonlight. Massive, deliberate, silent. The herd stood on the shoulder of the road, uncertain what the smooth black surface meant. The bull stepped forward, testing it with one hoof. His reflection shimmered faintly in the glassy tar, distorted by heat still bleeding from the day. God, Clara whispered over the radio. They found it. The boy pressed his face to the window. Why are they stopping? The father didn't answer. He knew. Animals hesitate when the world changes underfoot. Roads hum differently. They don't give the way Earth does. They lie still but vibrate, unnatural. The bull took another step. The herd followed slow and uncertain. Headlights hit them full. Another truck, coming fast from the opposite direction, too far to stop. Dad, I see it. The father slammed his horn, tires screeching as he swerved into the lane. The oncoming lights jerked sideways. Metal screamed against asphalt. The buffalo froze mid-road, caught between survival and confusion. The herd tightened around him. For a moment, everything hung motionless, the night holding its breath again. Then, the other truck skidded to a stop inches away. Its driver stumbled out, face pale, mouth open in disbelief. Jesus Christ, he gasped. Bison? Here? No one spoke. The animals began to move again, walking slowly, unhurriedly across the road. Their hooves clattered against asphalt, echoes rolling out like thunder taught to whisper. Dust from their bodies drifted behind them, settling over the yellow lines until the road disappeared beneath a film of earth. The father turned off his engine. The boy stepped out quietly, camera shaking in his hands. He didn't take a photo. He just watched. The bull stopped at the far side, lifting his head toward the faint horizon. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of dry sage and old water. He grunted once, a low, resonant sound that felt like it came from the ground itself, and led the herd into the tall grass. When the last of them vanished into darkness, the road looked abandoned, swallowed by dust. The driver of the other truck ran a hand through his hair, still staring. Never seen anything like that, he muttered. You think they'll survive? Clara stepped forward, voice steady. They already did. The father looked down the road where tire marks faded into soil. We built these lines to separate everything. Maybe now they'll remind us how to cross them. The boy lifted his camera but didn't press the shutter. If I take the picture, he said softly, people will think it's a miracle. The man looked at him, then let them. Behind them, the wind carried the faint, rhythmic echo of hooves long gone, steady, patient, infinite. The road, covered now in dust, seemed to exhale. Its black surface turned gray under the moonlight, no longer shining, no longer smooth. It looked almost like earth again.